welcome everyone to this I was going to say what number of how many we've done these, but I actually have no idea. 30 plus to our 30 plus founder chat. It's something we started, as I mentioned, about a year ago. And I really love it. I get to know all of these incredible founders in our community a little bit better. We have about 30 minutes for kind of a casual, structured conversation. And those who are joining us, whether you're here live with us right now, hi Jason, or if you're watching on IGTV or YouTube later, please do get in the comments, say hello, ask questions. This can be, although I have, we have some questions that we're going to go back and forth with. Please do jump in with your own, and we'll make sure to share those, whether it's live or later. I'm Melanie. I'm one of the co-founders and managing partners at Volition. And if you don't know Volition, at this point in time, we build connections, connectivity, and knowledge in global startup ecosystems. And one of our favorite things to say is you never know what can come from a conversation. So that's just what we're going to do today, is have that chat. And I'm excited because I don't think I've seen Laura since, I think it was 2019, mid 2019, at our women's pitch event. So that was the last time I was in Vancouver, and we went down to Seattle and got to meet some incredible startups and got to meet the startup ecosystem down there, which is really cool. And today you get to meet Laura Malcolm, who is the founder and CEO of a company or organization. I don't know exactly how you
it's a company.
Describe yourself. Company. Okay, yeah. I realize everyone has different ways they talk about themselves. Of Give InKind, which is a modern marketplace for organizing and sending support through life's challenging moments. Really interesting story behind this. Really excited to introduce you to even more of the people in our community. So Laura, without further ado, I'd love to pass it to you and just kind of let people know a little bit about kind of who you are and why you started Give InKind. What does it mean? Yeah, just a little bit of a taster, and then we'll get into some of the weeds a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And like you said, gosh, a lot can happen in a year and a half since we did meet in 2019. It's a whole different world. And as you may remember, and we'll be new to people here, is we have a pretty big story and reason for starting Give InKind, and now a lot of impact has happened since then. So I'll throw a trigger warning out there. That my husband and I experienced a late-term pregnancy loss in 2013, and that's significant and impactful. But we also were both coming from tech backgrounds. I spent 10 years in product management. He was an art director working on major brand campaigns. And so we sat at home after our loss. And what we found was that we had friends and family around the country that were, itching to support us and trying to figure out how, what do you do? How do we help? And they were using a tool out there today to set up this idea that somebody would be dropping off dinner at our house every day,
right?
And a calendar to sign up. And that was nice, but it didn't help our loved ones that were far away. And so all this work was created, like, what restaurant do you want takeout from? Who delivers groceries to you? Like, do you even like flowers? Like, what should we be doing to help? And because my background was not just in product, but I come out of working with local businesses, the internet yellow pages. So I spent all day connecting consumers and businesses. And I thought there has to be a better, easier way to activate all of these communities that are spread around the country, right? The people that used to be like in your cul-de-sac on your street now are spread around, and we have access to all of these on-demand services at our fingertips. But it's really not that easy to be like, oh, and my sister-in-law is having surgery, or my, girlfriend just had a baby 6 weeks early and they're in the NICU, and like, what do I do? How do I help? And so we built Give InKind in 2016 to make it simpler to organize and send support through these big moments. And those moments are everything from new babies to cancer support, grief and loss, surgery, recovery. And now we're since we met last, we raised just over $2 million in funding and have a growing team and a really impactful company that we're excited to keep growing.
Yeah, I think it's incredible. I remember being really inspired by your story back in 2019. I know you placed in one of the first, in one of the top positions at that pitch event, and people really connected with the story, and I imagine even more so since then, because there's been so many instances myself in the last year being over in Europe trying to support my family and friends here, and it would take me hours of research to kind of like try to wrap my head around what could actually support them in this time and what would they actually maybe need and want. Maybe I don't have like the language or comfort or something to talk to my friends and family about like what do you need right now. So a lot of people don't know how to react to loss and different forms of trauma, and we don't know how to talk to our loved ones about that even. So like I know I want to help, but how do I help? And then trying to find how to get like a parcel of like the perfectly crafted something to your loved one when they are home. It is so hard. It's gotten slightly better, I've noticed. Like in the last month, I've noticed, because I still do this, kind of like sending packages to people, but it is so hard, which is just bonkers to me. So I'm really curious. Like this started in 2016, and you're building this team. You built traction. You've raised funds. Clearly, there's a need for it. What has kind of the last year looked like then? Like my assumption is that it's growing. This need for it, but I'm really curious to test that assumption of mine. And what has this looked like for you?
Yeah, it absolutely has. It was as sort of crazy as it all started as it was, for everyone else, and sort of being here, I think now that it's changed every American's life. It's, we sort of forget that like in Seattle, it actually like the first cases were here.
You were the epicenter.
We were hyper aware about what was going on.
Yeah.
And, so we saw growth, we saw pages getting created, not just for helping people sort of stay home and stay quarantined. I think then there was, unfortunately, like more, I think, community spirit around like helping people stay safe. I think that's, changed a little bit over the last year. So we saw sort of these different phases. So one was there was a lot of pages for helping older people and immunocompromised people stay home and support them, and neighborhoods organizing, community support groups organizing, like asks and offers and what do you need. And we saw some pages getting set up for that. Then in April and May, we saw a huge swell of Feed the Frontlines campaigns happening. So we had over 200 hospitals and healthcare organizations around the US pour onto InKind completely organically to manage donations for their hospital staff. So for example, there's one hospital in Chicago that still has a campaign running. And they have, I think, over 20 individual departmental pages. And they're now using it all the time. But at that point in April and May, there were over 100,000 meals organized for frontline workers through InKind in those few months that put over $1 million back into local restaurant economies around the US. So that was amazing. And then I think what we really saw was we continued to see the ways that people were using InKind, just like even for the situations, like these life moments that are still happening. I think we sort of forgot that, like, even as we feel like life has shifted on its axis through COVID, babies are still being born. People are still getting diagnosed with cancer. We know that people are losing loved ones, and not just to COVID. And so I think that it shifted the way that we think about sending that support to people. And so we saw a lot of growth in the way that people are sending, meal deliveries or sending digital gift cards and things to just be able to, again, give that help from anywhere. And I think we sort of say now that, like, whether you're separated by distance or circumstance, which is sort of where the position we are in now, right? You might not even be taking dinner to your neighbor anymore. You want to just find a quick and easy way to help them. So we've seen, we've seen usage sort of change throughout 2020, but absolutely grow significantly through that time.
Interesting. I know you're only in the US right now, so how do we get Give InKind elsewhere? Is this part of your vision? Let us know what's that roadmap?
Yeah, we are working on it. So the thing about, I think, that makes Give InKind really special is that we're like half platform, half marketplace. So, when you create a Give InKind page, you have a care calendar, a wish list, you can connect your crowdfunding, you can share a personal update so people use it for sharing, new baby photos. They use it for sharing along their cancer journey. Like it's that all in one. There are pieces that we actually have people outside of the US who sort of like skirt our address requirements in order to use the platform tool portion of it. I mean, we've seen pages from Canada, from Israel, from Australia. But they can't, we have to unlock that part of the marketplace. So that's sort of the tricky part about, building a two-sided marketplace, of course, is that you want to have a really good experience for them. So we have to think about sort of how we are going to roll that out. But it absolutely is in the works, and because it's amazing to see people coming in from all around the world, like saying, this is so important to us. Like we need this. There is nothing like this available where we are.
Yeah. So what's your grand vision if you could kind of plant yourself in Laura's shoes 5-10 years from now? What does that world look like for you?
Yeah, that it's just a default behavior, right? I think that 50 years ago, when something happened to someone in our community, we all pitched in, right? It was like, oh, you're having a new baby. So like all the other, women would come, who had children before you and like teach you and show you and support you in that way. And I think that we've really lost that. We sort of went through these phases where, I say that like taking food is as old as time. That's just, across cultures and for generations, we've been showing up with casseroles at people's doors. And then we sort of like it was actually the beginning of the 20th century that we got both flowers sent anywhere and Hallmark. They both started between 1910 and 1920. And so then we sort of created this culture, right, where it's like, oh, you go to a Hallmark store. Like, I don't know. I remember like being a child of the, late 80s, early 90s and being like, let's go to the Hallmark store. And like, maybe there's a Precious Moments figurine that's appropriate for this moment.
I loved the Precious Moments aisle. Yes.
But like, what do we do now? And I think that we're recognizing that real help. So there was an article in the New York Times a few years ago that said that meal delivery gift cards are the new sympathy cards. And it's like, it's true, because when you're home going through something, I remember after our loss, like the first day that I went to the grocery store was brutal. And so I think that we're really shifting the way that we can activate communities to send this specific support. And so, my vision is that, in 5 years, it's just the default behavior. When something happens to someone, we are like, okay, great. Who's got your InKind page set up? Like, I'll get it set up. We all have accounts. We all know, like we actually dream about a vision where it's not even that you have to have a page set up for this situation, but like Melanie has her account. And when I want to send Melanie a thank you for hosting me on her IG Live, like I can just go to Melanie's account and be like, oh, she has a favorite bakery around the corner. Oh. And then I can just be like, here's 6 croissants. They're on their way. Like, thanks for having me. That we can actually share what it is that we like love in our community and what helps us, and like who's my house cleaner, and like if so if my mother-in-law wants to like treat me to that Sunday, and I think that pays back into local economies. And so that's the big thing.
I think that's so great. And it's so relevant to me right now, because I will tell you, if you're someone who has had to move during any of this, and you're going somewhere where you have to quarantine, or you're going somewhere with what I call a different COVID culture, can be quite traumatizing to go from somewhere that's had a really intense COVID culture to somewhere where it's a little bit less of, you haven't been in lockdown or something really intense. And like you saying, like going to the grocery store, I haven't had to do that because I'm in quarantine still. Everyone's been sending us food, which has been so, so helpful. But I'm actually quite nervous about the first time I go to a grocery store, because I haven't been around more than like 12 people in like 8 months. So that's terrifying. And I know that I'm not the only one that's going through something like that. So even just things like that, it's interesting, like how much just having people bring like dish soap and like shampoo and all these things to us is so needed. But I have to have vocalized that and built that kind of like support system around me. So I think it's even just like super hyper relevant to me right now, but I can see so many different uses for this. And I I'm really excited about it. I mean, I was back in 2019, but now, it's just so apparent what this could
Yeah.
grow into. And I'd be curious. So we're seeing at our pitch events a lot more companies popping up around building these kind of local systems, where they're saying like we need to go back to relying on the village around us. So one's called the Village app, for instance, and that's up here in Vancouver, or they're in Kelowna, I think. Anyways, so I'd be curious about like, have you been, or is it on the roadmap one day to kind of look into partnerships with some of these kinds of other companies who are thinking similarly to you, but they may have just like kind of just started building it in the last, year, especially as we're seeing all of the impact of COVID. And I'm imagining more and more people are thinking about how do we build the local ecosystem and the local village around me.
Yeah. Well, I think there's sort of two ways that we look at it. I think there's incredible things that are going on with local communities. I
Mm-hmm.
think that one of the points about Give InKind is that it's about again, our challenge was not necessarily bringing together our local community, but it was about having our personal network be really far away. And so
Yeah,
it
of
was like,
course.
how do we create that same feeling
Yeah.
and let the people, because on the, on being on the side of it where, that you experienced, where you want to show up for your loved one, like you wish that you were next door. I think
Yeah.
those are different behaviors, right? So like I would, um, I take when my neighbor has a baby, like I just took a meal over. And so I think it's really important to create an ecosystem where we are strengthening our local communities.
Mm.
Um, I think that it's important to create an ecosystem where we can strengthen our far away
Mm-hmm.
communities and get
Mm-hmm.
that sense of community back. I also really like that that I think that there are more startups taking a fresh approach to how we support local businesses and brick and
Mm-hmm.
mortar, which
Mm-hmm.
I haven't. Again, I mean, like, that's what I was doing 10 years ago when the Yellow Pages companies were, for all intents and purposes, like on a decline. As they're switching into digital, I was there through multiple mergers of the different Yellow Pages companies, and when I think about the position that small businesses are in today, right? I think that there's a real lack of like healthy marketing channels for them, and how do we get access to the businesses in our community. So I am
Mm-hmm.
very excited to see some of the things that are coming out that again are focusing on sort of, I think, what is a neglected industry, which is how do we support local businesses.
Yeah. So it kind of works hand in hand in a way, but have different lenses, it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. So it sounds like I'm imagining you've learned a lot along this journey. And one of our favorite questions on these chats is around what what would your tips be for entrepreneurs who are maybe just starting out in the last few months? Maybe they're thinking about starting out. What were some of the things that you wish you knew or you did know and it really helped when you were first starting out?
Yeah, I think, gosh, and we're just coming in on the 5-year mark actually since we took the plunge here. So it's been a lifetime.
Yeah.
Um, I think that, on the business level, like knowing what you are trying to measure and starting to measure that from the beginning. So like
Mm,
what is important in your business? Is it visitors to your website? Is it downloads to your app? Is it dollars made? Is it like, what are those metrics so that you know what you're building towards? You know how to define success, because I think it's
mm-hmm.
so important for us not to just sort of be blindly right out at sea. Like you have to know where you're going so that you can
Yeah.
correct course and do better if you're off track. And so I think that, on the business side, like just having really clear sense of your KPIs and tracking
Mm,
everything that you can in order to um, uh, have a historical record too. Like you can't show movement from 0 to 1 and 1 to 2 and 2 to 4 is 100% month over month growth. Like own it. Track things from the very beginning so that you can measure that traction.
nice.
On the personal side, just, take care of yourself as a founder Like
Right.
there are times where it is nonstop. And if you don't, most of the time, and if you don't balance that with like taking time where you can get it, you will burn out really hard. And so I think that it's, and I'm, I'm getting ready to go through another raise. And I just, I spoke to an MBA class last night and sharing some of these tips about like caring for yourself during a fundraise, because
Right.
that is the sprint within the marathon. And I think you have to get those practices instilled in you
Mm,
from the very beginning, just in terms of
right.
creating your, and I hate the term self-care, but like creating whatever your practices are, right? If it is exercise, if it is outdoor time, if it is just drinking enough water, you need to do all of those things to get through, because this is a long haul. We hear too many of the stories. And I would
Mm-hmm.
also say I just one of my team members gifted me the How I Built This book, which is the collection of stories from the podcast with Guy Raz. And
Okay.
it's incredible. And it really highlights the stories of some of the biggest brands and the founders and their journey. And it's just such a reminder that none of the big companies went out and raised on the first go, or got super
Yeah.
successful on the first go, or, found product market fit on the first go. And so I think trying to surround yourself with as many of the realistic stories of what this journey is like will keep you from having unrealistic expectations.
Absolutely. I love that. And I really appreciate that you gave the what to do for like the business and what to do for you piece. I think that's really important. And I'm starting to see that both elements of that story being spoken about a lot more recently. And often when we're asking entrepreneurs this question, every week they do come back with something around ensuring that you take care of your mental health. So clearly this is a really important piece. What was the name of the book again?
It's How I Built This. So
How I Built This.
there's a podcast on NPR where Guy Raz talks to founders, and then he just put out a book, I think like at the very end of last year, and it's
Okay.
so good. And just really, I think that we can get, we see the social media version of founder stories and the big funding
Yes.
announcements, and not any of the heart and the work that went into it.
Mm.
Mhm.
Oh, and I think like that, the fundraising journey story is never told. So our obviously it's International Women's Day coming up. Our Choose to Challenge at Volition is around raising and like placing the burden of change on women when it comes to addressing gender bias and pitching. But part of our kind of thing we want to do this month is kind of shed some light on that raising journey, both with people who have raised, people who have attempted to raise and were able to, people who thought they wanted to raise and then realized that was not the path for them. There's so many versions of that story. And like you were saying, taking care of yourself through the raise is important. And then what I've also heard is once you've raised, like there's like this kind of like, I don't know what it was like for you. I've heard there's kind of like a ooh moment. It's like you're done all of your exams and all of a
Yeah.
sudden your body's just like, ooh. And then you're like, oh, expletive. Now I have to actually do this thing.
Yeah.
I'd be curious about if you had any kind of tips around once you've raised, like that moment after, what
Yeah,
that feels like and how to deal with that.
absolutely. It is exactly what you just described, right? It is, I think that as you're approaching that, um, that mark, and you feel like that's the end game, it's really easy to think that like I just have to cross this finish line, because for so
Right.
long you're like pushing everything towards that. And there is that big crash. But then the stakes are higher. Like it is
Mm-hmm.
just, and I think that I underestimated that pressure.
Yeah.
And I think that we raised our first round, even though it was over 2 million, it was a pre-seed round. And so I think we had a
Mm.
little bit more time to like, we were going from no team members to a growing team. Well, now we're going out to raise a bigger round, and the I absolutely feel the difference between
Mm.
that we have to hit the ground running the next day. Like
Right.
the stakes get higher, and it also shows you like how short of a period 18 months is, right? So if you're building each
Mm.
one of these to show that it's 18 or 24 months in runway,
Mm-hmm.
you're already planning for your next round. And that
Mm-hmm.
is a mental, it's very taxing. It's just
Yeah.
mentally taxing, which is where it comes back to that, like, take care of yourself and pace yourself, and celebrate, but get ready to get back to work.
Yeah, yeah. So starting early to get those habits and to explore what works for you is going to help with those milestones, it sounds like, if you go
Yep.
down that route.
Yep.
Um, Thank you for sharing that. I'm wanting to learn more and more about this, so I really appreciate that you shared that. I think it's not talked about nearly as much, or nearly enough, I should say. Okay, so I know we're just kind of coming to the end of our founder chat. I'm sure there's so much more that we could talk about. For those who have just joined us now and missed the beginning, this is going to be on IGTV. It will also be on our YouTube. So please do go back and learn about the origin story of Give InKind, and how the company has really grown over the past 5 years and what the last year has looked like and the vision and all the things. It's really interesting. So go back and check that out. And again, if you have questions or want to comment here at the end, please do feel free to do so. So I wanted to mention, you talked about a bit of a win that you had, or big win, not even a bit of a win, a big win, which is that you had 1 million people come to Give InKind to find out how they could help someone in 2020, which is so incredible. And I'd love to know, how can we as your community support you in the vision that you're building, that vision of one day everyone just has their profile. I can go there and say, okay, I had Laura on IG, on our IG founder chats. I want to give her something as thank you for coming on. How do we help you? What's your ask here today of us, your community?
Thank you. It's spreading the word. And a great place to do that is that I still see in so many local groups, mom groups, different organizations that I'm in, like, some people post all the time in Facebook, going to their community, looking for an idea because someone that they care about is going through something. So how do
Mm-hmm.
I, our coworker just got a cancer diagnosis. My best friend just lost her baby early. Like, how do I show up for my friend whose parent just died? And there's so many great ideas that get put there. I would love to just throw a comment in if you heard about Give InKind. Here's a great tool that could be helpful. So any way that people can spread the word, that's the most. I want that 1 million supporters to be 10 million next year.
Yeah.
So we gotta
Okay.
go.
Fantastic. All right. So head to givinkind.com to learn more about Give InKind. And you're on all the socials, it looks like, at Give InKind. So that's super easy and straightforward. So go and follow Give InKind's journey. So what would be a way, if someone wanted to connect with you directly, Laura, how could they do that?
Yeah, so they can tweet at me at Laura Give InKind. That's a really good way to grab me. I'm also Laura at Give InKind for email. We are doing all sorts of new stuff with partnerships, local organizations. Like, we are happy to connect with anybody who has an idea about how to work Give InKind into their company or into an audience that they work with. We're happy to share more.
That's really interesting. Ooh, because I was thinking earlier, I wonder if there's a way to support new business owners or business owners who are raising or have just finished a raise. That would be such a neat thing to be able to provide to a community. Is like, how do we support all these founders out there?
Yeah.
Ooh, percolating. So everyone percolate, get to givinkind.com, and you can reach out to Laura in the ways that she said that you could. So as we wrap up here, is there anything that we didn't get to talk about here today that you wanted to mention?
No, but I am also happy to share anytime on that founder journey and fundraising, and so that's a big one that people can reach out to me for. I'm happy to share tips and thoughts on that anytime, beyond just how we support people. Supporting other founders and female founders is really important. So
yeah, I think I'll be following up with you because I think that's really interesting. So thank you so much again,
great.
Laura. There's one last question I always ask is, what is one thing that is bringing you joy right now?
Planning my summer garden. I am spending my time on the weekend with ordering seeds from the seed catalog, and I'm planning starts, and we're going to have a really great garden going this year, which will just save me more time going to the grocery store. So put in the work now and reap the benefits later. It's another one where it's the long game. So
yes. Okay. So I actually have something about this just before we go, which is that I spent the last 7 months or whatever it was living in the countryside and fell in love with country living, fell in love with having food. Like we had like a local dairy farm right next to us. We had a little shed that was an honesty shop that we could go pick up all of our produce. And so I didn't know nothing about gardening, which my grandma would be like horrified to hear. Were she here because she was an incredible gardener, as was my other grandmother, and my sister, and all these people. And so, where could one learn the first things they may need to know about starting a summer garden?
Ooh, I love it. So I ordered all my seeds this year from a company called Territorial Seed Company.
Okay.
They're based in Oregon, and they have some great information on their site. But I read a wonderful book recently. It's a 10-year-old book, but Barbara Kingsolver wrote a book called Animal Vegetable Miracle. And it was about 1 year of her family living off their own farm. And I just recorded a podcast with a friend of mine where we spent an hour and a half breaking down the book and sort of talking about a year in garden life. So I will send you all of those links so that you can do
really
some
happy.
digging in. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're
I did see we
welcome.
did get one question, so I'm going to throw that out there. Should be a quick one. Someone's asked, do you have a technical team in-house or is it outsourced?
Ooh, great question. We have a technical team in Thailand, halfway around the world, that has been with us from the very beginning. So back when my husband and I were a dream and sold our house and packed up a kid and went off to embed for 3 months with a dev shop in Thailand. 5 years later, they have now grown to more developers in Thailand and more in Poland. And our technical co-founder is based in Thailand. And it is a wonderful arrangement that has totally worked out for us.
Amazing. So you juggle time zones a bit, because I know Thailand and PST are not super friendly time zones together, but
we do juggle a little bit. Luckily, we now have a head of product who is a night owl, who does more of those nighttime meetings with Thailand. And I'm not doing a 9:30 p.m. stand up every day anymore, which works for me.
Excellent. All right. See, more of that, whatever you want to call self-care is, which is really important when you're juggling, well, always, but also with all those if you have a team from all over the world, it's difficult. So thank you so much, Laura, for being here. Thank you to everyone who has come and joined us, whether you're here now or later. We appreciate your support as well. Reminder to go check out Give InKind on all of the socials and at giveinkind.com. Really appreciate your time and all of your sharing all of your stories around Give InKind itself, but also that entrepreneur journey. It sounds like you're an incredible wealth of information, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Melanie. Talk to you soon.
Thank you. All right,
Okay,
everyone,
bye-bye.
thanks again. I will see you next week. All right, bye.